Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, the Board Secretary caused notice of the meeting to be given to the public and press on January 5th, 2017. Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Donner?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Munoz?
Here.
Mrs. Shanis?
Here.
Mr. Silverstein?
Here.
Mrs. Turnbull?
Here.
Mr. Walcott?
Here.
Mrs. Zilbershog? And Mrs. Cornelison.
Here.
I move to suspend the rules of order of business of the regular meeting and adjourn to closed conference session for the reasons contained in the resolution to discuss matters protected by attorney-client privilege.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Silverstein, seconded by Mr. Donner. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain? Opposed? Okay, we will go into closed.
I move approval to reconvene to the regular meeting of the Board of Education.
Moved by Mr. Silverstein, seconded by Mrs. Shanis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. And we, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Clark, are there any communications?
I have just a few items. Let me just get to those real quick. Come on, where are you? The first one, and this is really for any candidate, since we have two positions or three positions with two candidates that have applied. There is a third position, but any that would like to attend, New Jersey School Boards Association, they are holding a candidates briefing for the Central Region, and that's September 27th at North Brunswick High School, and of course that's in North Brunswick. Begins at 6:30 for registration, and the program's only 1 hour from 7 to 8 p.m. Item number 2, New Jersey School Board Association Healthcare Summit is September 29th at the NJM Insurance Group, West Trenton, starting at 9 a.m. If you wish to attend, please let me know and I can get you signed up. Item number 3, New Jersey School Board Association Sustainable Practices Working Session. This is on October 12th at the New Jersey School Board Association headquarters in Trenton, starting at 9 a.m. If you wish to attend, please let me know. New Jersey School Boards Association mandated training sessions. They will be holding additional mandated training sessions at the workshop, which is at the end of October. There are a few days if you'd like to go in person, but I believe most of you have already gotten it done. A couple of you know. I think it was 2 that hadn't completed, and I won't single you out. But you've already been signed up for online training, so you can get that done. And you have till December 31st. The 5th item, New Jersey School Board Association, it's the reflections from the executive director on August 29th. That was part of your packet. New Jersey School Board Association weekly program update from September 8th and 14th, which was also part of your packet. And New Jersey School Board Association school board notes from August 23rd, September 7th, and September 13th, which was part of your packet. Garden State Coalition of Schools, their news and notes from August 13th and 25th, along with September 8th. It's part of your packet. National School Boards Association, or National Connection News Bites, August 24th and September 7th, part of your packet. And then the big one, National School Boards Association, National Connection Daily from August 11th right through September 14th. They're all part of your packet. And that's it.
I move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 14th, 2017.
Moved by Mr. Silverstein, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? Sorry. No? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Scott Donner? Opposed. Opposed. Abstentions. So you've got Jack, Mrs. Shanis, yep, and Mr. Munoz. Okay. You good, Matt? Yes. Okay, moving on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Davino.
I'm sorry, the golf team, they're not coming tonight. They're going to be October 2nd. I thought they lost. Yes.
Yeah, I was concerned that
I
they
know,
lost a lot of weight, so. Okay, what that will actually bring us into then is a discussion on the latest park scores. And to give you some insights, Ms. Scudero will hand out to you, these are preliminary documents in the sense that in-depth analysis hasn't really occurred yet. We have begun in-depth analysis, but there are certainly trends and things that you can discern from this. As the year goes by and we get more data, we will have full-scale presentation for the public with respect to not only trends, but areas of growth, improvement, et cetera. But to explain to you, in short, to give you some sense, because by law we are required to report out the park scores to you when we receive them. And as you've heard me say many times, I am a proponent of these assessments because they provide us with lots of significant information, which our principals are in the process of poring over now. In fact, we had a very extensive principals administrative cabinet meeting today, supervisors, et cetera, in which we've gone over the generic aspects of what I'm about to go over with you now, but to really begin to dig much deeper into exactly what that data tells us. And so, for example, if we look at the first page, you're looking at English language arts literacy. For the Springfield Public Schools, and we have scores from grade 3 up to grade 11. And as you can discern by looking at the various levels across the board, that we compare quite favorably to the state, and which is more important to us than national scores, because our state, those of you that may not recognize, we are consistently and recently have been identified by several different organizations as having the second best educational system in the United States. And so as a state, we're doing well. And when comparing the district to the state numbers and profiles, it certainly bears out the positives that are occurring with respect to park scores, et cetera. And one of the things that I want to point out to you is, in particular, the grade 11 scores. You'll notice that only 48 students are identified there. That's because students that had already met their graduation requirements through PSATs, SATs, or taking an AP course were not included in these scores. So our most advanced students were not included, and despite that factor, within the 48 students, we compare quite favorably to the overall state results. This has been brought up at superintendent's meetings as well, that there was a trend with students having met those requirements prior to the 11th grade, weren't going to take the grade 11 test. And it reduced our numbers of students participating, which will manifest itself later in the year when you see the school report card, because we will not achieve a 95% participation rate. And you should be able to see that simply from 48 students participating in grade 11 is nowhere, it's not even going to achieve 50%. So we will fail that category of requirement under ESEA and others because the students just did not take the test. And that's not something that we have a lot of control over right now. And I'll get to graduation requirements at the end of this piece. The next page are mathematics. You have grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Grade 8 shows only 8 students, and that's because classified students are likely not taking Algebra 1 as 8th graders. We have all 8th graders except a portion are taking Algebra 1. That portion is identified during 6th grade, and they're on an advanced math track. They took Algebra 1 as 7th graders, and they take geometry as 8th graders. And those scores are not included in our PARCC scores. So our most advanced students not only aren't included in our middle school PARCC scores, but they're not included in our high school PARCC scores. They receive recognition of having passed the required tests. However, their scores are not calculated in the district-wide scores because they didn't take it in 9th or 10th grade. So,
Mike, can I
Mike,
just make
ask
sure I
you a question
understand
about that? I'm sorry.
So,
We may have the same question. Go ahead.
so when I look at Algebra 1, there are no 8th graders in this score. These are all, are you?
They are included. There's 200.
Seventh grade.
they're included in the
They're included in the
percentages,
percentages, okay. And in geometry,
but not in the school report
not-
card.
they won't be in the school report.
That I knew, okay.
Okay.
Seventh grade.
Seventh grade, right?
Right.
Yes. Algebra 1.
Right, and the 8th graders in Algebra 1, when they take it, aren't included in our school report card scores.
Right.
So they're included here. That's why you see the numbers
Right.
telling you how many middle school students and how many high school students.
No, in ours, we don't have that breakdown.
Okay,
We have it in ours.
with it, because we really don't want to identify, we're trying not to identify. But suffice it to say that the number of middle school students in Algebra 1 was probably close to 3 to 4 times the number of students in the high school. I'll tell you right out, 41 students in the high school took Algebra 1. Those are all, you're looking at middle school students taking a high school exam and with very, very good results.
And
At the-
passing it significantly higher than the
Yeah.
state average for high
I
school
was going to
kids.
say.
Yes, they're passing at a higher rate than the state average. Same thing holds true in geometry. We have about 40 middle school students that take geometry. And I believe that this year, all 40 met or exceeded expectations in a 10th grade course in geometry at the middle school level. Those are our advanced students, obviously, who ultimately are taking multivariate calculus and MIT courses of that nature at the high school level. So academically, from an ELA and a math perspective, we're doing quite well in a comparative analysis. What we're doing, however, that's important for you to really get a sense of is that, number one, you'll notice the Algebra 2 scores are very weak. That happens to be both statewide and nationally. We did an analysis last year, and we've embarked on a program this year that kind of changes the sequencing in mathematics. And so the traditional sequence is algebra, geometry, algebra 2. But we're finding that even our brightest students, even though they may meet expectations, really struggle to meet expectations. And so if that's the case, you can only imagine what students who are capable of taking algebra in 7th grade and geometry in the 9th grade, how much they're going to struggle with algebra 2. And so we've introduced an intermediate course, trigonometry, to provide them with what we've discerned through our analysis is a need for more exposure to advanced algebraic concepts, and that simply going into algebra 2 in their 3rd year of high school is counterproductive, And so since they're taking math for 4 years, by giving them geometry, trigonometry, and then Algebra 2, we're affording them a greater opportunity to score on the Algebra 2 exam and still, and really they're combined courses. It's pre-calc and trigonometry, and then calculus, Algebra 2 calculus. So they'll be better prepared for the Algebra 2 exam, and they'll be better prepared from a collegiate perspective because they'll be getting introduction and calculus as opposed to waiting until after Algebra 2 and struggling a little. So we're obviously going to await the results of something like that, and we're going to have to wait at least a year because there are some kids in that new profile currently, and we'll have to wait until next year when they take Calculus Algebra 2 to see how well they fare. But we do believe that it will have a positive impact on the nature of their scores. Part of the issue as well now, and we had a discussion of it in Cabinet today, and it was a matter of discussion at the last county roundtable meeting, but I wanted to bring everyone into a sense of awareness because you're going to see some changes taking place at the state level in a very short period of time. We are going to have a change in leadership in the governor's office, which means that we're going to see a change in leadership at the Department of Education. And that change in leadership will result in some new guidelines and parameters moving forward, and under a new governor who has at minimum a 4-year tenure, assuming that they plan to run again, and if they're elected or not. Here's the issue. For those of you that have children in our school system, the current freshman class graduates in 2021. If you look at the high school graduation requirements, they end in 2020. So freshmen are covered by graduation requirements that don't exist in writing right now. However, we've been told that the graduation requirements are going to be Algebra 1 and ELA 10. End of story. No PSATs, no SATs, no APs, nothing else. That everything else is going away. Not only that, that all students will be required to take all PARCC exams. How that plays out, I have no idea. What happens if a student is scheduled for geometry, for argument's sake, and is sick, but happens to be a high performer, gets an A in the class, a 95, whatever the case may be. Certainly not going to repeat geometry because they were absent from the PARCC exam. But if the requirement is that they took the PARCC exam, how do we accomplish that? At this point in time, unless you're scheduled and programmed for that class, you can't take the exam. That's what's currently. Partially. We have been told that 2020 is the last year for the current graduation parameters as they exist. That 2021, we have been told, everything else is going away. Beyond that, we haven't been told, is there a replacement? Will there be a replacement? And we have been told that requirement to take all PARCC exams will be in place. And so for students that are graduating in 2021, I've just shown you the example here on ELA. If they decide not to take ELA 11 because I met my graduation requirement, they may have taken themselves, refused to take a test that by definition they have to take in order to graduate. And how is the state going to implement that to boards of education in determining who's graduating and who's not? Now, it seems somewhat counterintuitive that you're going to take your brightest kids who don't take a test because they've already met the most advanced requirements and tell them they can't graduate because they didn't take a test. And not only is your graduation rate going to decrease, but just think about it. You can have a kid sitting in 12th grade who has an acceptance to Princeton, but who was out sick for grade 11 ELA, but they're in grade 12 and they can't take that ELA. What a conundrum. And we don't have an answer. Actually, that's very appropriate considering the conversation right now. It's very disconcerting that there is so much untold at this point, because in this year we've got to guide ninth grade students. How do I guide them? I can only make this information available. I can only suggest that in discussing with the public, we don't know, so refusal may not be a good option. While it's counterintuitive that they would prevent graduation, they've clearly not stated that they won't. They've told us the requirements are going to be, you must take the PARCC exams. The way I think it's written in the regulations is they must take PARCC exams that they are eligible for, which means that if you're taking a course that ends in a PARCC exam, you're eligible.
Mike, how do they square that with giving an 11th grade ELA exam that they're refusing to recognize for graduation? So if a kid gets a 745 in 10th grade and just barely misses, you're saying to the kid, don't bother for the next 2 years because you can't graduate. You're basically portfolio at this point. Even if the kid does exactly what you want him to do, which is, buckles down and takes 11th grade, which you have to take anyways, but actually scores a 760 or 775 or an 800, and the state says, we don't care. You still have to go the portfolio route or whatever route they're going to designate for.
We're told that there's not going to be a portfolio, but could you play that again? Because that's an appropriate time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really.
So if you fail, if you don't get a 4 or 5 in 10th grade, just phone it in. That's what the state wants. That's the message they want to send.
Well, I guess what we're really experiencing right now is a clearly understood change in political administrations, which is going to result in a change in the leadership at the Department of Education. And I know that I have recommended to each of the principals and supervisors when they go to their department and district-wide and county-wide meetings, state meetings that they attend, to please address this issue because it's really an issue of significance that has to be clarified. And I don't know that we can wait for the new governor to take office and for the governor to appoint a new commissioner. Now, if you ask me if logic were playing out, I would say that we would see an extension to the current graduation requirements until they come up with a new policy. Do I think it's going to happen? I've seen stranger things. So, but I think it's important that we all know what the issues are going forward, because as we all know, there is only one goal for every student in the district, and that's a high school diploma. There is no other goal. There is nothing else to be achieved. If you don't graduate, you haven't really done what you need to do. And so this is a critical factor, and every layer of our school district is designed to address that, to address preparation for graduation at the highest competencies that a student can reach. And by that, they'll be able to then make decisions as to how they're going to proceed with the rest of their life, be it career, military service, or advanced college education. But absent knowing what it's going to take to graduate, it almost seems it's like a comic book story. You just don't know how to. I really, if a kid came to me today and said, "What do I do?" I mean, it's almost like I have to say, "Try everything."
I don't know.
Try everything, because I don't know. We're going to throw it against the wall, and when we find out what's stuck, we're going to know what you got to do. But right now, as a ninth grader, I can't give you a very clear, specific, ask me for kids graduating up to 2020, I can tell you exactly what they got to do, because I know what it is. But after that, it's really a crapshoot, and we don't know.
Makes you like the HESPA a little more. For his, you know what, for his bad press as the HESPA got, you look back on it.
It's done. So just so that you do know how we utilize this data, we are currently analyzing iReady test scores from the previous year. Principals are lining that up with their teachers and supervisors against PARCC scores, looking for our actual correlation of correlation coefficient. Both. We're looking at it from an aggregate perspective, and it's a great question because the state, while they have given us criterion referenced information, they'll only do it down to the school level. In other words, we get what's known as a chart, and we're specifically precluded from sharing it. Just so that, you know, when you say, I've never seen the chart, we're specifically told, do not distribute this chart. But the chart tells us from, it's an advancing graph. So it goes from low to high, from number 1 to whatever the number is on a particular exam. So we'll just use grade 3 as an example. The number 1 is an indicator of the most difficult question on the 3rd grade test, be it ELA or math. That's the most difficult nationally. So they take into account all students' responses, and they determine, based upon all students taking the test, all student responses, what the most difficult question was. Then, I think there were 7, but I mean 7 forms of the test. I'm not sure if it's 6 or 7, but there are many forms of a test. And especially since it's digital, you can only imagine it's very easy to manipulate different questions on different forms. And so what you get is a chart that shows you where this particular school scored on this particular question in comparison to the state and the nation. And so when we look at question number 1, the most difficult question, and we see where we are in comparison, it gives us one sense of understanding. Then we know, because number 1 is tied to a very specific New Jersey state learning standard, so that you can drill down to the very root type of question that was asked. And then it tells you how many kids in the 3rd grade at that school got that question. And so if, for argument's sake, your graph shows you, let's say, I'll use percentages, but 20% above the state and the nation. What it's really telling you, though, is that if you had only 6 or 7 kids get that question, or did you have 75 kids get that question? So, you know, when I say don't get too high and don't get too low, well, it's the same thing there. Were the 6 kids that got that question your high-performing kids, and as a result, they scored higher? Or are they actually your average kids that still scored higher? The real issue is looking at what the specific standard is that was measured, and then looking at iReady analysis that does the same thing, but iReady gives us the same New Jersey student learning standard, but we can do it student by student. And so we can begin to identify, if we find that we've scored strong in an area based on the number of kids that took that question, whether we can begin to discern to a very large extent, was this as a result of quality instruction, resources, what do we have to modify? And in some cases, our graph drops down to the bottom line with no color dot. That means none of our kids got that question. So you can't even score it.
None of them were given that question, or none of them
None of them received it.
None of them even took the test that
You
had
would-
the question on it.
You would, right, because you would get a dot with a color at 0, meaning nobody got it right, and then they tell you the number of kids. But if you don't get a number of kids and you don't get a color, you know that nobody in that grade in your district got that question. So the complexity of the analysis should be readily evident. It's not simply, oh, you look it up and this is what we can't handle. It's a question of numbers, who those numbers turn out to be, how we compare and contrast that to iReady and the identifiers in iReady, and then to be able to focus instruction that you would hope by the middle of the year, after analyzing all this, that you can get to really focusing instruction for those kids in those areas that they really need help in. iReady is only about us. They have a correlation with Park. So I'm not concerned about how we score with relation to the state or the country. I'm only concerned about how our students are doing on the standards and the questions measured in iReady as compared to the same standards as measured by Park. And as a result, I can determine what level of correlation we have as a school district. We know that the national correlation of iReady to the Park exams is 82%. It's a very high correlation. If we hit 75% as a school, I would be very satisfied that it's giving you a 3/4 percentage of surety that you're hitting on the topical areas that need to be addressed. And so when you compare it to Park, its predictability of how kids are going to score, we're going to know from what our end of the year iReady assessments told us and what the Park results told us about kids scoring. We're going to see the correlation, and then we're also going to look at individually where those kids scored strongly or weakly in iReady, because remember, I can't see where they scored weakly or strongly in Park because I don't get an individual student analysis. That would be great if we could, but there's no organization that would allow that to take place because there are too many other questions and variables that it would raise and not really give you the information that you'd like to have to improve academic performance among the students. So just by way of information, as we go forward and we do a much more in-depth analysis and presentation for the board as we get closer to budget time, by then we should have some really in-depth analysis. And then obviously, this is the first year that we have iReady results. As we get more iReady results, we have more Park results, that analysis becomes simpler and easier and more focused as you go along, you know.
So the iReady that we have, did we go ahead and purchase the whole program, or are we still just doing the assessment portion
Just
of
the
it?
assessment.
Okay, so it's just, we're using that information of what they've scored alone and then using that into the classroom instead of utilizing iReady to help
Correct.
teach them.
Right.
But we're still, okay, so it's
Yeah.
same way, okay.
Yeah, we haven't changed that because sometimes products get to be too expansive, and so the instructional program, now measured by the test for the program, I'd rather it be measured by other factors and our own assessments with respect to kids meeting the New Jersey student learning standards, rather than, you know, evaluating the curriculum delivery through an iReady system. It doesn't mean that we might not ever go to it, but at this point in time, we're pretty satisfied with our approaches to instruction and curriculum. And so we'll kind of play with it this way. And then as time goes on, the more data we have might very well inform us that we'd be better off with an instructional program more closely aligned. But then if Park goes away and they come in with another assessment, now you're locked into an assessment and an evaluation system that may not be aligned with the next test. So, those are. Yeah, we're going to analyze it from all angles so that we hope we don't miss anything. Yeah, because they may skip over something. We see it in our curriculum now. We'll see it in any delivery system that you have, be it a textbook or everyday math or Reading Street. Every program has its strengths and its weaknesses. And if you buy into one systemic approach, you've bought into all those strengths and weaknesses. And you can't deviate. Whereas if you select your material for delivery of instruction and adjust and modify it to the standards, which is what you should be doing, we should be reading the state standards and, as the vernacular goes, unpacking the standards, then developing curriculum to address those standards. And once the curriculum is developed to address the delivery of those standards, you then select the resources for the delivery of instruction to meet the standards. And if you follow that paradigm, you're never locked into a system, but you're rather locked into an educational process that addresses the standards and not, because very often what you'd see is the book becomes the curriculum. It's the last thing you want happening. You just don't want the book to be the curriculum. You want the curriculum to be the curriculum, and you want materials and resources to deliver that material. And then it's up to, the administrators, supervisors, and teachers to value whether or not the resources we're providing are actually meeting those standards. And that's a very involved process. It's not, the easy way is, Mifflin has a great book. We're going to use that book. And they say it's aligned to New Jersey student learning standards. I'm sure it is. They also sell that book in Missouri. And they sell that book in Texas. And they sell that book in California. And they're telling them it meets the Missouri standards, because it does. They told you. And that's the thing you have to steel yourself against. And it's sometimes very difficult, but it's really the only way to deliver appropriate instruction and material. So I urge you all to keep an eye out. And if you ever have the opportunity in the next couple of weeks to find out from our candidates for governor what their take is on the directing of graduation requirements, I wonder how many of them would be able to answer the question about graduation requirements, because it's going to be in their hands in January when they take office. So, and it's a problem. You got it.
All right.
Yes.
ABR.
I don't, she didn't give it to me.
It's in the packet. Steps to the agenda.
Before we move off of this, because I know it transferred out, I just wanted to clarify for myself about our scores for the math, 8th grade, because obviously there's nothing percentages for the higher. You're telling me those 8th graders that are on the Park math are ones not taking algebra or algebra 2 or geometry?
The grade 8 math only.
Right, that's just not,
Grade
that's
8
just,
math only?
that's different, completely different math. A
They
7th
are
grader who's
likely-
taking algebra 1 is that, or 8th grader taking,
You're talking about the 7 students?
is it,
We don't
no, I
have
don't
that
have any,
number in
Okay.
I don't
front
have
of
any
us,
students in
but
it.
yeah,
I'm just saying it says grade 8 and a percentage
With the
wise.
star, right?
Yeah.
Level sheet.
Yeah.
Those are
Those
just
are
kids-
students that are not in algebra.
Right, okay, so that's just,
They're not in
They just haven't met
geometry,
that
they're not in
level of
algebra,
to be able to take
and they
that.
are likely,
just want to make sure that's why no one's on that higher level than something.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
It's a small group, okay, great.
This is it.
thank you. Okay. The school we have to develop an assessment of each of the school buildings, in each of the school buildings, to address the handling of anti-bullying efforts and what was done, and to each school assesses their own levels of compliance, et cetera. And some of the items, for example, we have to have annually established HIB programs. We have to have implementation, documented HIB programs, approaches, and other initiatives. There needs to be an annual school assessment of those programs. School-wide conditions that are put into place to prevent HIB. Identified patterns of HIB reviewed by the school with respect to school climate and school policies designed to prevent HIB. So those are the indicators that every school has to review. There's training. We have an approved HIB policy, which is mandated by the state. This is not even a policy that we actually draft. We're actually given that policy by the state. And all of those areas are given point totals. And so the subtotals and the averages are put together for each school, and they're added together, and you get a district-wide score. And our district-wide score is a 77. And that's out of
78.
a possible total of 78. So the maximum we could score was 78. We scored 77. That has obviously been already reported to the state, and this is the report to the Board of Education that our schools have met all of the requirements of HIB prevention programs. That said, we are instituting this year another program. For those of you that aren't aware, we are a charter member of the Innovate NJ school districts in the state. We started out when the state asked for innovative educational practices that were going on around the state. As a school district, as many other school districts, we submitted programs that we think are innovative that we're running. We submitted them to the state, and we were accepted as a charter member of the Innovate NJ schools. That has undergone some additional growth and expansion, and as a result of looking at some of the data and scores that we were looking at, and in particular we were looking at economically disadvantaged students and their scores, and that was the first innovative program that we put together, and it had some very positive results. And as a result of that, we began to expand it. Well, we've expanded to the point where we include not only economically disadvantaged, we include ESL and second language families, et cetera. And this year, we're expanding it to do something with respect to HIB prevention. And we will be incorporating, in lieu of some of the disciplinary practices that everyone is implementing, we'll be adding a program in lieu of suspension or discipline that will be part of the Innovate NJ We've brought in an outside LCSW who will be working with us in training and meeting with both individuals who are found to be guilty of an HIB incident, as well as victims, to assist them and their parents in coping skills and ways and means to avoid the victimology that encompasses someone when they start to feel that they're going or have been harassed and it's going to get worse, and also how families can recognize signs that their child may be involved on either end of this when they may not think so, looking at it as a parent in which they are emotionally involved with the child and may not be able to see some of those objective identifiers that a non-school person, this is an outside LCSW, who has no connection to the school other than providing the service of intervention, counseling, and programs. So we're going to be implementing that along with some other advances in technology, which we're in the process of working with a company that at this point I can't even speak to. It's so new that it will probably, if it all works out, it will be on the scale of the first time laptop computers could connect with the internet wirelessly. We'll be involved with doing something in the realm of HIB utilizing technology that has not been tried anywhere else before and has some promising outlook that we're in discussions with this company now. That we're not the first ones that engage this company. There are 4 or 5 international applications going on. I think South Africa, I know 2 states in the United States, but we're the first school district to think of it in its application to HIB and the results of HIB that, and one of their CEOs, the two partners that created, happens to live in Brooklyn and was out here last week to meet with our principals and everyone to discuss what our philosophies are and then to incorporate the media center. And he's just dying to get involved with us because of the advanced technology within the district and what they believe that they can bring to the table. But it will not only involve parents and adults, but a good portion of it is going to be student created. And that's the part that I'm most excited about. It's going to be kids helping kids and working with kids in getting these things addressed before they become untenable. So we've scored high on our self-assessment. We don't have many HIB incidents, but we have them. And no matter the number, they still have incredible impact on both sides of that equation. Both the victim and the perpetrator suffer immensely from that particular experience. And we hope to engage in a program that'll help us prevent this at certain levels and use kids in doing so. So that concludes.
Okay.
I move to accept and approve the superintendent's report as presented.
Moved by Mr. Silverstein, moved by Mr. Silverstein, seconded by Mrs. Shanis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Opposed? Sorry. Just comes like that. Okay. This is where we come to the public input of items of the agenda of the regular meeting. So anything that's on the agenda, you may come up and speak now. If anybody's has anything on the agenda? No. No? Okay, seeing none. Move on to the business portion. Mr. Donner, would you please call finance?
Before you do that,
Yep.
we did have one adjustment but on school government, it's on the personnel attachment. When I sent out the Rice notice, I did have the correction, but I did not put it on tonight's agenda. So that correction, if you look at last name Doring, first name William, it actually spells out 6/half year second. Problem is we put it down for the first half on the original agenda, so it should be on the second half of the year, not the first half. That's it. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks, Matt. On the paper, yeah, but not on the one we have. Okay. Mr. Donner. You stole my thunder.
Oh, you can.
No, yeah, no.
You do it.
Yeah, we're ready.
I move motions 1 through 6 with the roll call vote.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Donner, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? No? Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Munoz? Yes. Mrs. Shanis?
Yes.
Mr. Silverstein?
Yes.
Mrs. Turnbull?
Yes.
Mr. Walcott?
Yes.
Mrs. Cornelison?
Yes, motion passes. Mr. Silverstein, would you please call school government?
Yes, I'd like to move motions 1 through 8 with a roll call vote.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Silverstein, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll? Okay.
Yes, but these are overnight.
Right.
Overnight come to the board. Yes,
Have to be approved by the board.
yes.
Any other discussion? No? Yes?
Ask a question?
Turn your mic on.
Sorry about that. For the quantitative criteria in number 1, the 8.1 and 8.2, this technology standards. Now I know when we did the 7th grade under that last year, and this is now for the 8th grade. Isn't it the same exact set of standards? Because in 8.1 and 8.2, according to the state, says that it's 6 through 8 are the grouping of standards. So does that change, or is it different actually from 7th grade to 8th grade for these kids?
The rubric for 7th grade is different than the rubric for 8th grade. It's just like any other academic standard. While the standard is in place, ELA standards all have the same standards, but the level of rigor and competency are different for 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
Okay, so even though it's just not outlined, obviously in the state thing, there is a different level to
But
doing it.
8.1, 8.2, that standard doesn't change. It just outlines what the standard is. In fact, the state utilized our rubrics because they didn't even break them down the way we do.
Right, because I said it's grouped in a,
Yeah.
that middle school thing. So just want to make sure it is, we're not doing anything wrong.
It's not the same
it's a
thing.
dip-
yeah.
It will be.
And the
considered
county
different. Okay.
superintendent would deny it
Right,
if,
okay. I
if
just want to
it
make sure
were.
for us, because
Yeah.
it looks like, you know what I mean, the same thing, so, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Sure. Okay. Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Munoz? Mrs. Shanis? Mr. Silverstein?
Yes.
Mrs. Turnbull?
Yes.
Mr. Walcott?
Yes.
And Mrs. Cornelison?
Yes, motion passes. Mr. Wolcott, would you please call buildings and grounds?
Sure, I'd like to move motions 1 through 10 with a roll call vote, please.
Moved by Mr. Wolcott, seconded by Mr. Munoz. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Clark, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Munoz?
Yes.
Mrs. Shanis? Mr. Silverstein?
Yes.
Mrs. Turnbull?
Yes.
Mr. Walcott?
Yes.
And Mrs. Cornelison?
Yes, motion passes. Before we move on to the open public session, I have a statement that I'd like to read before we move on. So before I open the meeting to the public comment, please note that we understand why some of you are here tonight. The board has been made aware of some various concerns and communications with the district's administration. Initially, while your comments are welcome and encouraged, please be guided by a few rules as relate to public meetings. First, we request that you be respectful to district staff during your comments. The board has both a legal and ethical obligation to support the staff in the proper performance of their duties. As a result, we request that you refrain from making disparaging statements about specific staff members. We caution you to remember that our meetings are video recorded and publicly aired. Second, please just be respectful of time. We don't want to be here until midnight, or I don't anyway. All right, legally we can't, but please. Third, please be mindful that public meetings are not the appropriate forum to discuss individual student-related matters. Therefore, neither the board nor the members of administration present here this evening will respond to any questions or comments regarding individual students, even if those students are yours. Public comment is an opportunity for you, as members of the public, to comment on matters of import to you. Our meetings are held in public. They are not meetings with the public. Therefore, we may not, and likely will not, answer any specific questions and will not engage in a debate with members of the public, even if a member of the public endeavors to invite such a debate. Finally, as to the topic, we understand many of you are here to comment upon, some of you are here to comment upon, the district's schedule. Please know, as I stated earlier, that the board is aware of the concerns you have expressed in individual emails and communications with district administration. As I have personally expressed to several individuals, the board's role in overseeing student scheduling is limited. By law, the board cannot administer the schools. Therefore, the board is prohibited from dictating to its administration the classroom assignments or schedules for any student or teacher in the district. Instead, the administration is charged with using its expertise and discretion to fulfill these responsibilities. There are a lot of opinions concerning the best educational strategies, but we rely on the administrator's expertise and entrust them with making recommendations regarding the district's policies and procedures. So with that, I open the floor to anybody that would like to come up and speak. Please say your name and your address at this time. Come on up. Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
You don't have to lean in. It's pretty sensitive.
I really honestly wasn't planning to speak tonight. I just kind of came to sort of listen. Oh, I'm Samantha Keston, 45 Fernhill Road in Springfield, New Jersey. Okay? I'm going to be real quick because I have to pick up my son somewhere, but I just really felt it was important enough of a subject where I've written to some of you guys, as well as the principal on multiple occasions, related to the looping concept. And I'm not talking about my own child specifically, but as a whole, I hope that if any of you have read some of the emails or heard our concerns, that a specific policy be put in place, because I understand that it's too late for our children now for this year, and their placements are where they are. And it's unfortunate as a parent who feels really uncomfortable with where her daughter is repeating the same class with the same teacher and the same students again. We all have our different reasons why. Some of them are educational and some of them are social. But I really feel strongly that without a proper policy in place, there's kind of all over the place about what the rules are. And the frustration from us as a group of parents has been strong and upsetting and, you know, not really okay, because I feel like we're not really getting answers to a lot of our questions. And I understand that that can't be met specifically about certain children and whatnot. But you know, when you have a concern about your child, whether it's they're not learning properly or whether they're with a group of kids that make them come home and cry every day, you really shouldn't have to repeat that year again if you vocalize your concerns over and over again before the looping happens and the placements are made. And really, that's just what I want to bring your attention to and what I'm here to support in whatever way can be possible about changing those rules going forward, that no parent should have to be forced into a situation where they don't feel that their child has an out, and that you turn to these people who are in positions of leadership and you ask for help, and nobody wants to help or figure out a way to help you figure it out. And it's just, we'll watch it, or we'll do this, or it'll be okay. And sometimes it's not okay. Sometimes it is, and sometimes you're lucky. And in my case, my daughter's okay right now, and that's fine. But I'm here because some people are not okay. And we talk about our policies about bullying and everything else, and I feel really strongly, not so much on the educational side about my reasoning as to why I'm here, but more for the social side of it for my own child. And I just feel like there is a fine line of what true bullying is, and I wasn't, and I'm not ready to make that call. But there's also what I would call like subtle bullying, where it's just mean children, and I feel like kids should also not be exposed to that, because while it's not something that you can open a file with necessarily against a certain child necessarily, it happens, and it happens often, and it's really upsetting, and it's hard as a parent to have your child go through that and then kind of not get a response that you need for your child to be taken out of that situation when they've gone through it a whole year prior. And so that's all I want to say. I just really hope that you guys as a board, again, I'm not involved in this type of meetings or anything, but I feel like I hope that you guys can talk amongst yourselves at some point and figure out a way so that in the future this doesn't happen, where looping becomes either a full necessary thing where no parent can opt out, or it seems that some teachers are allowed to loop, and then parents can say, hey, this is my concerns, I don't want my kid in that class again. And some principals or some schools say, okay, you can trade out because your reasonings mean enough to me. So it needs to be consistent and across the board and every time. So that's it.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else that would like to come up? Just give your name again and address. Thank you.
Sylvia Caggiano, 58 High Point Drive.
Thank you.
So I second what Sam is saying about the board should be involved in a looping policy. It shouldn't be a change every year. I have some notes because I don't want to speak just off the cuff. But one thing you did say that I did find antagonizing was that we should be careful with our words. Perhaps you should speak to the administrators. I won't name names, but I've been yelled at. I've been called a liar, and that's through an administrator. So maybe those rules that apply to me here tonight should apply to all administrators. I should never be yelled at. I should never be accused of being a liar. I should never be called emotional. And I shouldn't be accused of being a stalker. So those rules that apply to me here right now should apply to all administrators. But right now I'm discussing the looping. That just really agitated me, that I have to watch my behavior, but an administrator can run amok. So just today, Superintendent Davino responded to me alone. I would appreciate if the reply goes to everybody that is included in the email, because then I have to reply to them. He again has refused to meet with us as a group of parents and taxpayers to address this looping issue. Ms. Superintendent Davino, you wrote the placement decision was made with considerable thought and attention to the needs of all of our students, and that this decision is consistent with best educational practices. In other words, my authority cannot and will not be questioned, so why would I waste my time to meet with you or anyone else? My interpretation. You also wrote the placement decision was made with considerable thought and attention to the needs of all of our students, and that this decision is consistent with best educational practices. In other words, my authority cannot and will not be questioned, so why would I waste my time to meet with you or anyone else? My interpretation. In your email today, Superintendent Davino, you added that Mr. Plius has already responded to a plethora of questions on this topic during multiple meetings with parents. One wonders why such a sound educational decision, truly in the best interest of the students, would generate a plethora of questions or require multiple meetings with so many parents. Importantly, however, Superintendent DeVino, you did not respond to any of the very specifically outlined points raised in our prior email or address Principal Plyce's questionable conduct in defending the decision both in person and via the telephone with parents. You all received the email. I can go over those very specific points if you want, but you all know to what I refer. This board cannot sanction Superintendent DeVino's attempt to silence parents and taxpayers with legitimate concerns regarding our children or the actions of his subordinates. We have a right to meet with any official who is on the public payroll, and this board, who is charged with hiring and supervising Mr. DeVino, should support us. The decision to loop this class is an unmitigated disaster. Principal Plyce has crumbled under the weight of defending it, even lashing out at parents in anger. And the taxpayer-funded time Superintendent DeVino has devoted in date to crafting emails denying the need for a meeting would be better spent actually meeting with us. That's the end of it, really,
right, I'd
unless
ask
you
you-
want the specifics.
No, but I just
But
said,
you all received that email.
yeah. We just asked not to give disparaging remarks, and you have, so,
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what was disparaging.
about Mr. Plius, so if you could refrain from that. Okay.
What I
Okay.
said was the truth. He lashed out at me.
Okay.
I'm,
But I
I
asked
don't
you
know how that's
respectfully to not,
okay,
Okay.
perhaps you can ask Mr. Plius to be as respectful of me as I'm expected to be of him. And I would like to try to make a meeting so that we can establish a looping policy so this doesn't occur again. So it doesn't occur to my son for a third time, and it doesn't occur with my daughters. And no one will meet with us. No one is interested in implementing a policy. I think it's a simple request.
well, as I had read, it's an administrative, it's not the board's responsibility,
You don't oversee
not the administrative.
or policy?
We deal with policy, but that is not in our realm. We set policy, but that's about it.
So
It's an
there'll be
administrative.
no policy set for
That's, as
looping.
I've emailed you before, and I've said tonight, that's an administrative policy. That's what they deal with.
Okay.
And we leave it up to them. We give them, that's our job.
So when
and we entrust in
Superintendent DeVino says, no, I will not meet with you to implement any looping policy,
Right.
I'm just out of luck.
I don't know what else to say. We entrust him. This is our superintendent that we back and we're behind, and it's an administrative policy.
Okay, so no meeting means no meeting.
I think his letter was pretty clear. His
I
email
thought mine
pretty
was clear. My answers are unanswered. My questions are unanswered. There's still no policy. So we are exactly where we were.
Okay.
There's no looping policy.
I'll just speak loudly. My understanding, ma'am, is that you do have many conversations with members of the administration, particularly Mr. Plius, as you've mentioned.
Yes.
And then unfortunately, you're not happy with the answers that you got. So the administration has met with you, has attempted to explain the situation, the educational reasons behind the decision for looping. And as Madam President has mentioned, it is not the board's role to dictate the schedule. So you've asked a lot of questions specifically about the schedule. And scheduling is not something that is the prerogative of the board. It is the prerogative of administration.
And as Sam has said, we've accepted the placement. I'm not going to have my son moved out of his classroom now the second week of school. But I don't understand why there can't be a clear looping policy. I don't think that's an outrageous request to know when is looping appropriate, can parents opt out, and when someone says the entire class will be looped and then some children are not, why is that acceptable?
So educational decisions are made by the administration every day, and sometimes, as I believe you've been told, parents are not able to know what those decisions are for other children. So there are specific decisions made in the educational best interest of children that we're not able to discuss with you.
Okay,
So
I'm not asking you to discuss the other kids, I just don't think I should be lied
Well,
to and told
I think
it's an entire class, and then it turned out it's not the entire class.
respectfully, I think you're making assumptions based on information that you don't
No,
have.
so that's what I was told in June by, I don't know if I can use names then, or if that would be disparaging.
I think the board understands all of your concerns.
I was told the entire class.
They have all of your emails.
If it were to happen.
I understand
So it
that.
happened, but it was not the entire class. And I'm tired of playing semantics with a specific person. I did not say this. I did say that. It gets, and I know the implication by Mr. Plies has spoken to you many times. Yes, but nothing was done. Nothing was heard. There's still no looping policy. And I'm being told that I cannot speak of someone in a disparaging manner, but yet I can be treated disrespectfully by an administrator. That's acceptable somehow.
So the board is not condoning any unacceptable behavior by any of the members of its administration or its staff. But as far as you're not getting the answers to your questions and the semantics, I think you've gotten answers, and respectfully, you may not agree with them, but those are the answers of the district. And the board is not going to create a policy regarding looping as you have invited
so
it to
you
do.
will not?
Because it is an administrative function.
Will the administration make a policy?
The board sets policy. The administration does not set policy.
So the board will not set a policy for looping?
The board is not going to set a policy for looping. That is
Ever.
an administrative decision. But thank you for your,
The board sets it, but I'm not understanding that.
the board sets policy.
So the board will not be setting a policy this year in regards to looping?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not administrative, it's the board that sets the policy?
No, I don't.
I mean, I think it's going cyclical. and
No,
I-
it's not. I think you're not getting the answers that you're looking for respectfully. The board is not charged with scheduling.
No, not scheduling, looping, a looping policy.
Right,
Who can
looping is
establish that?
respectfully, looping is scheduling. It goes hand in hand with
Okay.
scheduling. What teachers teach what classes and what students are in what classes is purely an administrative function that deals with the scheduling. So the board does not deal with that.
Okay.
So respectfully, thank you for your comments, and the board has
And
heard
just to
them.
be clear, my questions were not answered. Teacher taking prep time to travel, that was not answered.
I'm
Again-
sorry that you feel that way,
That's
but
not
thank you.
disparaging, it's not how I feel.
I know, but
it's
we're
a fact.
talking about
Okay,
someone that's not-
but you're
you
saying
can't
my
defend.
questions were answered, I have them in email and I have no answers. I have these questions, no answers,
The questions that you
and I
asked.
don't even
that
know
the-
who you are, I'm sorry.
I'm the board attorney.
Mm.
The questions that you, I'm not sure what that was related to, but I'm just going to continue to say what I'm going to say, and then thank you for your comments. The questions that were appropriate to be answered were answered. You were provided with a lot of information, and you had several meetings or phone calls with members of the administration. So again, I'm sorry that you're not
I had
happy.
several meetings with
May I
Principal
finish?
Plius.
May I finish?
Certainly.
I'm sorry that you're not happy with the answers that you got, but unfortunately, those are the
No,
answers.
see, okay. It's not that I'm not happy with the answers that I received. I did not receive the answers.
I don't
That's my
think
point.
you're not listening to everything I'm saying.
I
So,
am listening.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you for your comments, but I have several questions here that were not answered. So you're telling me the administration met with me or spoke with me several times and answered my questions. I presented them to Superintendent Davino and the board. These specific questions were never addressed.
Again, what I said was those questions that you asked
Yes.
that were appropriate to be providing responses to you, you were provided with those responses.
So
the
the
rest of them,
ones
you're
are
not happy with the answer,
inappropriate.
and I understand that.
No,
but
no,
there
I'm
are
not
certain.
unhappy. I just didn't hear. Are you saying the questions to which I received no answers is because they're inappropriate questions?
Right, some of the questions you asked were about specific decisions made for other people's children. The administration is not going to answer those questions. The other questions that you asked, specifically about the educational import and the backing of the decisions for looping, were answered. I understand that you weren't happy and you disagree, and in one of your
No,
emails you
I'm
specifically
sorry.
mentioned that you weren't happy and you disagreed with that.
But
But at this point in
disagree
time,
with
you're
my
not-
answer with my
At this point in
questions
time,
having
during
been
a public,
answered.
during a
Okay,
public
I'm
meeting.
I'm sorry. You think it's okay for a teacher to poll students as to who
You-
wants to follow her? That's acceptable from
So-
a professional?
You know, I apologize, I have to interrupt because we're at a time limit now,
Okay, so now I have to wait till next month.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what it takes, but unfortunately, we stay on a time limit.
Okay, so you guys
and we
must
have
think
other
it's
people
okay
that-
for that.
That is not at all what the,
Obviously, because I can't ask the questions. She can interview the kids. She can call out the kids who say no. My child can be pulled out of
where it's not
class.
appropriate to talk. I'm
Okay.
sorry. So
All
thank
right,
you very
thank
much
you
for your
so
comments. I
much.
appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to come up at this time? All right, Joe. State your name and address.
Sure. Joe Fories, 24 Killer Street. This may be a small little blip on the radar, but however, it is important for some of us. And but I just want to know the status or where we stand with maybe the funding of the assistant coach as far as the varsity. I mean, I know it's an easier subject maybe to deal with right now.
It has been addressed in committee, and we'll be going forward at the next board meeting.
Okay. Is this a good thing? I mean,
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I said going forward.
Going forward. I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
Joe, October 2nd.
Okay.
is the next
All right.
Yeah,
We-
because of new regulations with respect to notifications of persons that will be discussed by the board.
Okay.
The time frame does not allow it to be addressed before the next board meeting.
Okay. Okay.
But it will be addressed
I mean, it
moving
was-
forward.
Okay. It was just a very odd thing that there's a freshman schedule out there, and
It's
it was
done.
It was very.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Okay.
October
All right.
2nd.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe. Okay. All right, any other open public? Anybody? No? Okay. So we will go into new business. I would like to, on the positive side, read something. Not that it's all negative, but we're going to kind of go back to Mr. Davino was talking earlier about Innovative NJ. We did receive a letter from the New Jersey Boards Association, which I received. It says, I'm going to read part of the letter. Dear Mr. Davino, which was crossed out, Mike, because it's from,
I have not gotten it.
and Dr.
Yeah,
Dr.
Dr.
Feinsod. He's the executive director of New Jersey School Boards Association. Congratulations, the Springfield School District's Engaging Parents as Partners in Closing Achievement Gaps, Innovative NJ, program is the recipient of the New Jersey School Boards Association's 31st Annual School Leader Award. This year, the judges of the 2017 School Leader Award program selected one school district program for recognition. Mr. Davino will be invited to receive a plaque and a special recognition during Workshop 2017 at the Atlantic City Convention Center on Wednesday, October 20th. Yes, absolutely. This is, an amazing award to get, I think. He's worked so hard and tirelessly to have this program, and I just, could not be prouder to be a part of our school district. So thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Davino. This is, now you
Thank
can
you
have
for
my
the
letter.
support.
You don't have to wait for yours. I got mine before you got yours. So anyway, so that's part of our new business. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
What a
But you support it.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't get this. I don't create programs that the board doesn't support.
Right.
And it requires their support and trust in what we're doing. And, to be recognized as a school district, you can have it. To be recognized as a school district, to have
awesome.
such innovative programs is really exciting, particularly since what I think is most gratifying about this is that it's really aimed at a population that people would not automatically presume exists within the township of Springfield. And for the board to support a program, despite that, it's not the majority of the community, demonstrates the board's commitment to the entire community. And I think that's probably the most gratifying part of that award. So I will at workshop accept it on behalf of the Board of Education.
Thank you.
And that's why it's important, because it's not a majority of the community. If it was a majority of the community, it wouldn't be nearly as needed, and that's why it's important.
Yeah. Yeah,
we will.
absolutely. Yep. Put it up. Anybody else for new business? Hillary.
The Jonathan Dayton Bulldog Auction is Wednesday, November 15th at 6 p.m. The doors open at 5 p.m. Tickets and tables have gone on sale. So I have a flyer if anyone is interested. November 15th, correct. 6 p.m. is the starting time. They open the doors at 5 p.m. so you could preview all the baskets.
Is there an online preview? I think I read somewhere that there's a way to view the baskets. I
Not-
saw something like that on Facebook.
Unless there's something new that they're starting this year. They've never had
Yeah,
that
I
in the
think
past.
that's what they said. Starting this year, you can.
They did not mention that at the PTSO meeting.
Ask Cindy; she might be
Yeah,
aware.
they didn't
I don't
mention
know.
it.
No, all right. I read something to that effect. I'm making it up.
Or a little virtual do something.
Yeah, I heard you could preview it ahead of time.
All right, any other,
Scott.
thank you. Any other new business?
Yeah, I was going to mention the columns.
Oh,
I
right.
was going to
Scott
mention,
is
Sorry.
if for anybody who has not driven by Walton this year, whether you have a kid there or not, you should. The Ted Balke, is it?
Yeah.
The custodian. I don't know whose idea it was. May have been his, may have been somebody else's, but whoever's idea it was great. He painted all of the columns holding up the porticos at Walton to look like giant pencils. And it really looks cute, and I think was a great way. I actually drove through when you drive through the loop, you can see it. Each one of each of them, it's yellow almost all the way up, and then silver, and then pink at the top. It really looks great, and I think
What a great idea.
was a great way for the kids to come in and see that.
And it's so funny, like you never think, something little like that can make such a big difference. I mean, it really just it was such a great thing. So we have to give him kudos though. So yeah. Anyway, simple things in life. Any other new news?
Yes, sure.
New
I
business.
forgot, was it the 7th?
Mhm.
It was the 7th, right? September 7th, Robin and I had attended the communications, what is it called? Communicating to the public. I don't even know what the title of it is. Dinner with NJSBA, and Mr. Davino, along with 3 other panel members, discussed ways to, or how their districts and compelling ideas of how to communicate in times of need, when there's like an emergency to the public, aside from just everyday kind of information disseminating out to parents and the community. So they had I think a lot of information. I mean, a lot of kind of what they kind of brought up and talked, I think we do here already.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't like, oh my God, we should try this.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of things that came up that we thought were worthy of further investigation and looking at. So it was a nice evening. It was nice.
Yeah.
It was good.
It's really it was informative, and it's nice to hear kind of other points of view and then hear Mr. Vino speak as well. I mean, they definitely had a lot of ideas, but a lot of things we already do. We're on Facebook, we talked about Twitter, we talked about Instagram,
Right.
We have that, so it's nice.
But they came up with some ideas.
Yeah.
Although, I think with regard to someone had developed an app and,
Right.
which
Yeah,
kind
which we
of,
talked about.
brought us to more ideas of what possibly could happen. So,
right?
And we are exploring
Yeah.
the potential for an app.
Well,
Right.
I've already tasked these seventh graders to do that, because in the class, they're supposed to build
Yeah,
an
I was
app,
gonna
and I
say,
told my
that's right,
son,
let the seventh grade
build an
do it."
app about communicating to the public. He's like, that's not fun. I want to make one with a filter. I go, shut up, just do this, because
We're gonna make it
it'll
fun.
look so cool if you go and go, I think we should do this.
Yeah.
I go, come on. So he wasn't too thrilled with my idea, but whatever, we'll see.
Any old business?
Yeah. Guess what?
Policy.
Yes. All right. Our because of Columbus Day and various other scheduling quirks, our next policy meeting will be on October 23rd, but our next one following that will be a week later on October 30th. So let's make sure everybody has the 6,000s and 7,000s policy and regs completed and sent to Matt before those dates, because we're gonna bang through those with 2 consecutive sessions on consecutive weeks.
And Matt,
Emphasis on the policies and regs, do a comparison of the both at the same time.
I want to say the ones that I have received gave me the 6,000 that way. So, and if you gave me 7,000, you gave me that, but I know most of you gave me the 6. So it's really, I'm looking for the 7. We're in good shape on the 6.
yeah, I was gonna say, does anybody need it resent out, or does everybody have it? No? I know, I know, you gotta ask, there's a lot of people at this table. Okay, all right. Any other old business?
Just a reminder for school government committee to stay behind after the meeting, so we can continue or begin and take care of the evaluation, which we'll do at the next board meeting.
Moved by Mark Miller, seconded by Mr. Donner. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Opposed? Meeting adjourned.